Okay, the interview we've all been waiting for. Eddie Hearn's return to IFL following the fallout and fall through of the AJ Fury Undisputed fight. Now, Eddie Hearn pretty much echoes the things that I said in my most recent video about this situation. He blames Bob Arum. He finds a lot of the stuff that went on very questionable, but he stops short of blaming Tyson Fury because, just like I said in my video, he doesn't know how privy Fury was to the details of the arbitration. And that's something I have to clarify again, because there's a lot of people who seemingly don't understand the difference between withholding judgment and exoneration. I'm not exonerating Tyson Fury. I didn't exonerate Tyson Fury in my previous video. If you don't know what exonerating means, find yourself a dictionary, okay? I'm not exonerating him. I'm just reserving judgment until I get enough information to allow me to make a judgment. At this point in time, Tyson Fury, as Eddie Hearn suggests, has plausible deniability. You don't know how much he was privy to. Either his team deliberately withheld things from him, or maybe he just told his team, I'm not interested, just tell me when the fight's on. These are possibilities. For example, Canelo Alvarez, when he sued DAZN and Golden Boy, the reasoning he gave for doing this was that he wasn't privy to certain conversations going on between DAZN and Golden Boy. And that is a very, very high-level fighter. Okay? So if that can happen to Canelo, what makes you think it can't happen to Tyson Fury? I'm not saying it did happen. I'm perfectly open to the possibility, as I said in my previous video, that Tyson Fury was fully privy to everything that was going on behind the scenes with regards to the arbitration. Maybe he was in on the whole thing, but he has the plausible deniability. So until I get some more information, I'm going to reserve judgment for now. Okay? Understand the difference. Get it into your head. There is a difference between withholding judgment or reserving judgment and exoneration. I'm not exonerating Tyson Fury for anything here, people. Or of anything, excuse me. Anyway, Eddie Hearn seems to suggest that indeed Team Fury, particularly Arum, gave him the runaround because what? They were stuck in this legal situation with Deontay Wilder. They obviously tried to fight Ajit Kabayel, or apparently tried to fight Ajit Kabayel, and that was blocked by Team Wilder. So they thought, you know what, let's give Eddie Hearn the runaround for a few months. We'll make out as though the arbitration is totally sorted and there's no issue. And then, if it doesn't go in our favor, then we can just say, haha, sorry, Eddie, but the fight's not on. We're fighting Wilder, and sign for that immediately. That's what Eddie Hearn is suggesting here. Now, one piece of evidence, if you want to call it that, which suggests that Tyson Fury didn't really want this fight. And again, Eddie Hearn stopped short of saying that, or at least coming to that definitive conclusion. But he talks about how Tyson Fury hasn't seemed particularly devastated now that this undisputed fight with AJ has fallen through. And that's one thing I will concur with. Tyson Fury hasn't seemed angry at his team or angry at whatever, Deontay Wilder. He seems to be smiling and all very happy about the situation. Now, people have pointed out that Tyson Fury announced that the AJ fight was done. Then the next day, the fight was off because of the arbitration being won by Team Fury. I already covered that in previous videos, okay? If people want to keep bringing it up, I've already covered it. Yes, that is a strange thing. It doesn't necessarily mean Fury was privy. Again, who knows what Fury was privy to? I don't know, and neither do you. You might have an idea, you might believe, you might have your suspicions, but can you confirm it for definite? No, you can't. You don't know. So that's what I'll say about that. And as far as Eddie Hearn being naive, he concedes that perhaps he shouldn't have trusted Bob Arum, but the reason that he did is because Bob Arum is a very experienced promoter, 90 years of age. He's put on some of the biggest fights in boxing history. And he thought he was dealing with a level of businessman whereby once you're into the minutiae of a deal, talking about, purse splits and broadcasting deals and rematch clauses and, the fine detail. When you're at that level with a promoter with so much experience, with a very high standard in the game, you expect some professionalism, don't you? Maybe Eddie Hearn just underestimated how skullduggerous an individual like Bob Arum can be. And that's a lesson learned for him, right? But at the end of the day, you have to place first and foremost the blame on the person who's partaken in the skullduggery rather than the person who fell victim to it. Now, as I say, Eddie Hearn should learn from this. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Moving forward, if there is any hint of an arbitration going on for one of Anthony Joshua or any of the fighters Eddie Hearn represents, any of their potential opponents, then Eddie Hearn should stop short of actually engaging in a negotiation. And he can easily say, hey, look what happened with the Tyson Fury AJ fight. It fell through because of their side claiming that the arbitration wasn't an issue when it clearly was. Now, some people have suggested that actually Eddie Hearn was in on it as well. That it was Hearn collaborating with Team Fury and that it's all just to create hype and excitement around this fight. And a lot of these people are sympathetic to what John Fury has been saying over the past few months, because John Fury has said that there's no money for this fight and, nobody wants to pay it and this, that, and the other. Well, I haven't seen any interviews with Prince Khalid from Saudi Arabia. If this was a collaboration between Team Fury and Team AJ, I'm talking about the business people here rather than the fighters themselves, because this is what some people believe, then the Saudis would have to be in on that as well, right? Because we are assuming the Saudis are very angry or very upset that they were promised this fight, that they've done a lot of work in terms of securing the funds and what have you behind the scenes, only at the last minute to have the rug pulled out from under them. So if Eddie Hearn was in league with Team Fury in terms of just creating hype for a fight, which both sides knew they'd never be able to deliver, then that means, of course, that the Saudis would have to be involved in that as well. Either that or the two parties don't care about messing the Saudis around and, getting them upset and so on. So I don't know. I'm not saying that I believe in that particular idea, but I'm just relaying to you the fact that some people do. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about all the stuff Eddie Hearn says in this interview with regards to the collapse of AJ Fury. One more thing I want to point out is where he said that the fact that Team Fury was so quick to sign the Wilder rematch rather than look for a workaround is suggestive of them never really wanting the AJ fight in the first place. Because if the shoe had been on the other foot, he would have said to Team Wilder, okay, let's offer you whatever number you're comfortable with to step aside, first and foremost. Or perhaps, as I suggested in the previous video, you can fight the winner of AJ Fury. Or maybe we vacate the WBC belt, you could fight somebody else for the belt after we fought for the undisputed. You could at least have a conversation. You could at least, there's always a number. That's what Eddie Hearn kept saying. There's always a number that will make people comply in the world of boxing. But it seemed to never get to that stage with Team Fury and Wilder. They were just happy to sign right away. There seemed to be no negotiation period at all. And bear in mind, they stand to make far more money from the Anthony Joshua undisputed fight than they will from a trilogy fight with Wilder. So you would have thought that they would have tried everything to salvage the undisputed fight if they could. So make of that what you will. Did they really want the fight at all? Was Tyson Fury privy to the whole thing just being a ruse to mess Eddie Hearn around for a little bit? I mean, Eddie Hearn talks about how Team Fury never did any work on this fight, that it was only him doing all the work. And that is also indicative of them not really wanting to fight. But let's say that Team Fury had won the arbitration. What do you think would have happened in that situation? That's not something which I don't think was covered in this interview of Eddie Hearn, but I'm asking you guys, if Team Fury had won the arbitration, do you think they would have gone through with the AJ fight? Maybe they knew a week, 2 weeks prior to the arbitration decision that it wasn't going to go their way. Again, I'm just putting a possibility out there. I don't know that for a fact. Would the negotiations have broken down much sooner if Team Fury knew they were going to win the arbitration with Wilder? Would they have found another way to get out of the fight? Again, this is a question for the people who believe that Team Fury never wanted it all along. So, and also with regards to Tyson Fury, AJ calling him a fraud. There are a lot of AJ fans out there I've noticed who agree with this. They think Tyson Fury is a fraud. I think that that is a step too far. Tyson Fury is definitely somebody who can be very duplicitous, dishonest, deceptive, but he's done some real things in his career. He has climbed up off the canvas in tough fights and battled his way to victory. On numerous occasions, he's done that. Okay, so he's real. He went over there to Germany and fought Vladimir Klitschko with all the odds against him, with the spongy canvas and all the funny business the Klitschkos used to like to do behind the scenes. And he won the fight. And he won it big on the scorecards, right? Well, in fact, I don't know if the scorecards were actually that wide. I can't remember now. It was a long time ago, but at least on the fan scorecards, he won it big. He didn't get dropped like AJ. I know AJ was he ahead on the scorecards against Klitschko, which I always found bizarre and ridiculous. I think that Klitschko was outboxing AJ for the majority of that fight. But, you know, Fury went over there to Germany, proved that he was real in that Klitschko fight. When he came back and fought Wilder in America, he proved he was real in the first fight. He proved he was real in the rematch. Yes, he's had these funny nothing fights in between, and there's a lot of messing about with Tyson Fury, a lot of theatricality, always trying to play mind games, not only on his opponents and on their promoters, but also with the public. You know, Tyson Fury likes to try and manipulate people's perceptions. So I get that. But to call him a fraud would be to deny what happened in the Klitschko fight, would be to deny what happened in the two Wilder fights, would be to deny the heart that Tyson Fury has shown on numerous occasions, the ability he's shown. So to call him a fraud, nah. Tyson Fury's not a fraud. Is he a manipulative individual? I mean, in the world of boxing, he definitely can be. But I see him, as I've said before, similar to the way I saw Floyd Mayweather when he was campaigning at 147. A very, very good fighter. I'm not saying Fury's on that level, by the way. I'm just talking about his mentality, the way he managed his career. A very, very good fighter, but he was an even better manager than he was a fighter, because he would pick the right fights at the right time against the right guys. He knew when it was right to fight certain people and when it wasn't right to fight certain people. That's not to say that he was fighting jokers and cream puffs. No, he was fighting very, very good fighters most of the time. Okay, and I'm talking about Mayweather here. With Tyson Fury, yeah, he takes some dubious fights in between fighting really good fighters. We know that. But he still fights those very good fighters too. So yeah, I'm definitely not going to call Tyson Fury any kind of fraud, because I was elated when he beat Klitschko. He ended the dark ages in the heavyweight division, and I'll be eternally grateful to him for that. Because the Klitschko era was so depressing. It was so devoid of excitement for the most part. And the thing which characterized the Klitschko era that I really couldn't stand was the fact that the Klitschkos were so much more talented than all their opponents, but yet they still, particularly Vladimir, wanted all these extra advantages, the spongy canvases and giant rings and custom gloves, always trying to mess with the opponent in terms of making him as uncomfortable as possible. We heard Kubrat Pulev say that he was tested multiple times in the run-up to the fight against Vladimir Klitschko, and Klitschko wasn't tested once, or he was only tested after the fight. All kinds of funny carry-on. And then in the ring, of course, Vladimir Klitschko would hug his opponents to death. He would lean all over them and do all kinds of excessive holding, lean. I mean, you're not allowed to lean down on an opponent anyway. Clinching, yes, you can do to a certain extent. A certain extent is permitted, but leaning down on the opponent where you're literally pressing all of your weight so your own feet are leaving the canvas, like Klitschko when he fought Alexander Povetkin, that's not permitted. That's illegal. Klitschko was doing that throughout the course of the bout. So when you're already tremendously talented, you got all these advantages over your opponent: height, reach, punching power, physical strength, and on top of that, you're using dirty tactics. And on top of all that, you fight in a very boring style most of the time, where your trainer literally has to scream at you at the top of his voice to get you to knock out a guy you should have taken out about 6-7 rounds ago, like Eddie Chambers. So seriously, people, the Klitschko era was just so depressed. It was the dark ages of heavyweight boxing. Tyson Fury is the one who put an end to that. Yes, Anthony Joshua was on the rise and various other fighters were up and coming, Deontay Wilder and so on. But Tyson Fury was the one who toppled Klitschko. It was him who did it. So no matter what you say about the man, no matter how deceitful he's been in other situations, that's one real thing that he did. He got those belts off Klitschko in Germany. I mean, Germany was a place where people thought there's no way anybody's going to be able to go over there and beat Klitschko. The odds are far too stacked against them. Even if they have a certain amount of ability, just look at all the funny business the Klitschkos carry on with, including the contracts. People talked about how absurd the Klitschko contracts were, where the voluntary challengers were paid an absolute pittance. And then they had to deal with all the shenanigans behind the scenes. And then if they somehow managed to win against all the odds, they'd have to fight Vladimir again. And if they won that fight, they were then obligated to fight Vitaly. These are the contracts that these fighters were on. Tyson Fury put an end to all that. So again, I can only be eternally thankful to him for that, for opening the heavyweight division up again. Now, prior to Klitschko losing to Fury, I was one of the few people saying that Klitschko is going to lose to one of these young up-and-coming heavyweights sooner or later anyway. I certainly didn't specifically say it was going to be Tyson Fury, but I knew that he wouldn't be able to carry on for, let's say, another 3-4 years. Take on all these young up-and-coming guys, Wilder, AJ, Fury, etc., and beat them all. At least one of them was going to get him. So it's not like I thought Klitschko was invincible from there on in. I saw that the heavyweight division was changing, that there was a lot more talent coming into it than we'd seen during the Klitschko era. But be that as it may, the way Tyson Fury did it, I thought maybe if Klitschko loses, it might be something similar to what happened in the AJ fight, right? Where he's actually winning the fight, but, AJ manages to pile on the pressure late on and take him out. I never envisioned somebody beating Klitschko the way Fury did, where he just outboxes him, runs rings around him. I never envisioned anyone doing that. So that made it even more. It was like the tables being turned on Klitschko and him getting a taste of his own medicine minus all the clinching. And there was almost some poetic justice in that. And I do say justice because the way Klitschko was carrying on, and he's a great fighter, Klitschko, but the way he was carrying on through much of his career with the shenanigans and the contracts and the fouling and it was foul. That's the best way I can describe it, actually. It was foul. Vladimir Klitschko was carrying on foul for too long. And it was killing boxing. I know Derek Chisora said this on numerous occasions, but it really was killing boxing, or at least heavyweight boxing. Since Klitschko was toppled by Fury, if you don't think the heavyweight division is far more exciting now, far more interesting now and attracts far more attention now, then you're clearly insane. Okay. And obviously that's not all down to Fury beating Klitschko, but that was one of the key ingredients in the revival of the heavyweight division. Probably the most major thing that has allowed it to happen. So anyway, let me stop waffling on about Tyson Fury here. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.